Hello, my name is Kevin Dodge, and I will be reading Storytime with Matt, Part 2, That Time I Lost My Sausage. So when I was around 6 or 7, my parents had a Coronet 440. This car was massive. They don't make cars like this one anymore. I'm fairly certain it was made from old aircraft carrier parts and plate metal from bank vault doors. It was noisy, clunky, huge, and old. It took up a lane and a half when it puttered down the road, and the kids could play a fairly roomy game of touch football in the back seat with the windows up. Barely anything in that car worked correctly. The seat belts were broken and had no tension mechanisms, so you just had to tie them in knots around your waist whenever you sat down. But that problem was accidentally fixed at one point. One previous owner decided that the interior of the car, once black leather, could do with a few repairs. There were some cracks and tears here and there, but nothing major enough to warrant his fix. He simply covered every square centimeter of black leather in duct tape. In the Louisiana heat, this meant that about a day and a half later, the heat melted the glue and dried up the top layer. So the silver came off, leaving the interior as a solid layer of white string and duct tape adhesive. This was quite handy when slamming on the 3 remaining brakes because malfunctioning seatbelts don't hold a passenger to the seat quite as well as industrial strength glue did. You know that sound tape makes when you pull it away from the roll really fast? Well, that's what it sounded like when we unstuck ourselves from the car. I still don't have hair on the bottom of my arms or thighs 30 years later. After a while, the seats started to look furry from all the legs and arms that had been waxed over the years. I swear those seats could give Chewbacca a Brazilian in 3 red lights. The electrical in the car was so crossed and shorted that once on a long trip to Florida, it started to rain. Dad hit the wipers, and we soon learned that the car had some sort of automotive attention deficit disorder. The car had one of those long speedometers that went horizontally like an old radio dial and took up 2/3 of the dashboard. Dad was driving 60 in the rain on the interstate, and the wipers were switching back and forth when suddenly the speedometer started gradually switching back and forth with the wiper motion. 65, 55, 75, 50, 75, 45. It would switch back and forth further and further as we drove. The rain eventually let up, but we kept the wipers going for another 80 miles or so, watching it click from 0 to 120. Click, 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 click. Dad had hoped we didn't get pulled over because he doubted he'd be able to recreate this one for the police. The car was originally a bright white, but over time it became a deep yellow, made up of mostly rust. Mom was terrified of washing the car because rust and dirt was the main component holding most of the car together by this point. She screamed in the driveway as she held the hose and watched a brown river of parts start falling off and heading for the storm drain. No one else was worried as the rust was covering 3 inches thick of iron plating that had once been the outer hull of a World War I battleship. The cannonball marks on the rooftop were a dead giveaway. If you're thinking, what does this have to do with us sausage? I'm getting there. Just double knot your seatbelt. The car was a heap. Smoke and rust and loud bangs and sputters would warn you of the family's approach from up to 4 miles away. But the engine? This car sputtered and popped and banged, but once you pressed the gas down, it sounded like it could eat through smaller cars like a fat kid through a pile of unwrapped cupcakes. Mom and I were in the car at the red light once. Smoke coughed out of the exhaust, belts squealed, the car shook like we were driving up a dirt road, but we were at a complete stop. So this bright red Porsche convertible pulls up next to us with the top down. The guy with sunglasses and nice blonde hair and a polo shirt, seemingly straight out of a damn Mentos commercial, looked over at us and laughs. He revs his engine mockingly, while my super Christian mother contemplated what Jesus would do and calmly tells me to double knot my seatbelt. My quiet, civil-tongued mother was already going to race this guy. The light turns green and he peels out and my mom floored the gas. We took off so damn fast I had to wait for my 6th birthday again. We passed that little red car, hit 88 miles an hour, and passed him again. The only other time in my life I heard an engine that loud was at a monster truck show with my buddy Kevin. So anyway, after I turned 6 again in 1st grade, I had to go to school super early. School at the time was rather awkward for me, and yes, of course, I'll explain why. From preschool to 4th grade, I went to private pre-K to 12 Christian school. Now, all at this same school, all at the same time, here's a list of some of the staff. My Aunt Nelda, who ran the nursery, my Aunt Sonia, who taught preschool, my mother taught kindergarten, my grandmother taught first grade, my dad taught in high school, and my Uncle John was the high school head coach. My Aunt Ramona taught PE, my grandfather was the maintenance man. And since this school was attached to the church, my dad was also the children's pastor. So I was at this church/school upwards to 8 times a week at some points. If I got beaten up during recess, there was a 78% probability that I was related to whoever was doing that day's pummeling. So on this particular school morning surrounding said sausage incident, my dad had to be at school super early. His church duties overlapped with his teacher duties, requiring him to be at a morning prayer meeting with other church staff at an hour so early it was doubtful God himself would even be awake yet. Mom had a hard time wrangling me in the mornings even with Dad's help, so she suggested that he should get me up and bring me with him instead. Dad told her he refused to do that. So Dad got me up the next morning to bring me with him. He threw some clothes on me that he was fairly certain were mine, and 2 shoes that were at least similar enough, threw some toothpaste at me, and called it good to go. Then he got me out of bed. We piled into the tank boat car and headed out before sunrise with most of one headlight. I was grumpy. I didn't like school. I didn't like being awake. I didn't like being up before the sun, and I didn't like prayer meetings. And I was certainly mad because we didn't get any breakfast. Well, my dad had a fix for all this. Dad was a big guy. I don't mean like pro wrestler. I mean like roles of unknown origins. He asked me to scratch his back once, and I said, which one? And got grounded, but he genuinely had at least 4 of them. Anyway, being a big guy, Dad understood comfort food, and despite being one of the cheapest men in the known universe, every once in a while I could convince him to buy me fast food. Well, today, Dad decided we were buying breakfast. I was already excited. Dad got us sausage biscuits at a place called Mr. Cook's. Now, these weren't like sausage biscuits from McDonald's or Burger King. These sausage biscuits were the size of my thin, twice 6-year-old head. The sausage patty was crisp, juicy, and the size of a decent frisbee. The biscuit was golden brown, flaky, fresh, and looked like it could feed an entire family of woodchucks. And the smell, oh, the smell. I could punch an old lady square in the face if I could smell those sausage biscuits one more time. So Dad appeases me with food on the way to church. He bought 2 for himself and went through them like a tree chipper before we left the parking lot. So I'm sitting on the seat, kicking my short feet off the edge, enjoying this juicy, delicious, meaty manhole cover-sized biscuit, when Dad approaches the dumbest thing ever constructed in our city. In front of a major hospital on one of the most major 7-lane roads in the city is a 5-way intersection. They all just converge like a kid dumps out Hot Wheel toy cars. It's a tedious and nerve-wracking part of the city to navigate, and I know several people who have gotten into accidents at that very spot. So my dad, being the responsible man he is, punches the gas on a yellow light. The car starts flying off as we make the curve at Mach 11. As Dad Tokyo drifts through this turn in a 20-ton car, my 400-pound car door flies all the way open. It was like that final scene on Alien where Ripley blows the airlock and the xenomorph gets fired out into space, except I was the alien. I flung sideways, still clutching my sausage biscuit because, priorities. I'm dangling sideways by my double-knotted seatbelt, arms stretched out like I'm on a horizontal roller coaster about an inch from the pavement. Dad's driving over at ludicrous speed. I'm screaming, Dad's swerving, my grip on my biscuit tightens. I'm actually watching the tires squeal. Dad flings the car in the other direction so far that it springs me back up into the car, still screaming. The door slams back shut. I'm still screaming and crying, and Reverend NASCAR over here starts frisking me for injuries. Are you hurt? Are you okay? Where are you hurt? I'm fine, I scream through my snotty tears. Well, what? You're scared? Are you scared? I shake my head hard. No, I'm not scared. I take a big heaving 6-year-old sob as I clutch my biscuit. Well, if you're not hurt and you're not scared, then why are you crying? I scream heartbroken. I lost my sausage! And continued wailing in agony. We took the turn so fast that when my arms stretched out, the centrifugal force and momentum literally sucked the sausage patty out from between my biscuit halves, flinging it like a meat ninja star out into the unknown sky. I had just stared death in the face. I had come inches from expiring, and all I demanded from the afterlife was the safe return of my meat circle. I quieted down. Dad felt bad as he drove. The car was silent for a minute or two. He realized he'd been irresponsible. He realized he shouldn't have been rushing like that, and in the blink of an eye, he had almost lost what really mattered. He looked down at me as he drove on slower. He said tenderly with tears in his eyes, "I'm sorry, son. I love you, and I would have been really sad if anything would have happened to you." "Are you going to eat that biscuit?"